Hi, I have a mic and a pulse, and this is the fifth and final episode of my 5-part series going over each of Starfield's skill trees to figure out what the skills do and what gameplay secrets they may hold, this time focusing on the tech tree. Now, without further ado, Episode 5. Some assembly required. The tech tree was previously the least well known, as we only saw a few scattered skirks, but we now have a good look at all of its skills at both low and high levels, and they can be broken down into 4 roles: atomizing enemies, optimizing systems, boosting your velocity, and bypassing security. For atomizing enemy ships, or simply disabling them, we have 7 skills. 5 cover the main weapon types, which use the same projectile types as the ground-based weapons, just scaled up a little, with ballistics focused on hull damage, lasers breaking shields, particle beams hitting multiple systems at once, missiles tracking, and electromagnetic weapons disabling systems. Oddly, while the ground weapon skills are all clustered in tiers 1 and 2, the ship combat skills are all over the place, even though you'll clearly be using a wide variety from the moment you first take off. I have no idea if this reflects some broader design philosophy, like electromagnetic weapons being high tier so you can't disable and capture enemy ships easily in the early game, or if they just needed something to fill out the higher tiers. You can, however, target enemy systems early on with the targeting control system, which seems to require a target lock to use, and has a limited number of shots you can fire with it, so it's not an instant win condition. Also, it looks close enough to one of the tier 4 combat skills that I now think that combat skill might also be a special targeting skill instead of just for criticals. There is also a 6th weapon skill that doesn't correspond to any known weapons, but as the focus of the design seems to be on the turrets themselves rather than the projectiles being fired, it could govern auto turrets that protect the flank of larger ships, and we've seen guns that point to the sides instead of forwards on some ships like the Celestial. For optimizing systems, you have Starship Design for unlocking new upgrades, and several skills that, on further consideration, actually seem to boost your general stats rather than corresponding with systems 1-to-1, with piloting for maneuverability, payloads for cargo capacity, these two probably being shields and top speed, and Starship Engineering by process of elimination probably being durability, though for reasons unclear it shares the gear and drafting tool motif of several upgrade research skills in the science tree. The elaborate explanation, based on the fact that we know some UI elements don't appear until they become relevant, is that it actually is used for researching upgrades, and the research menu just doesn't appear until you've unlocked it, which also carries the enticing possibility of even more research trees for things like artifacts or robotics. The simple explanation in which we don't make up an impossibly good version of this game in our heads and then get disappointed when it's not real is that at some point Starship Design and Engineering were the same skill, but fearing its power, the devs split it into 2 pieces, with Design keeping the research functions while Engineering kept the patch and the repair or durability bonuses. So don't tell my mom this is what I do with my time, but the barely modified Frontier in this year's trailer has 15% more health and 40% more shielding than the barely modified Frontier in last year's trailer, and as health is determined by a vast number of tiny pieces, it seems more likely that those are the result of multiplicative skill bonuses rather than a random assortment of parts having their stats change enough to make up the difference perfectly. Unlocking extra parts may have more to do with what manufacturers you have access to, as here we can see the player only being able to buy Deimos or Nova Galactic Habs, with some parts possibly either only being available from certain shipyards or requiring quests to unlock, like having to do a little bit of work for Walter off Constellation Records in order to acquire the finest in Stroud-Eklund technology. We still don't know whether you're going to have to buy all of your spaceship parts or can make any yourself out of harvested resources. I think it's likely in general, since unless they take the Mass Effect style, it costs 25 megagrams of palladium to upgrade 1 pistol approach, there's no clear sink for the resources your 30 automated mining facilities will be gathering, and the higher ranks of Outpost development do prominently feature spaceships, suggesting that you can upgrade your manufacturing facilities. While it's not connected to any of the tech skills, there's also a lot of potential weirdness in this game's crew system. Like in Fallout Settlements, every crew member seems to both need a place to sleep and a place to work, here called passenger slots and crew stations, but with one very confusing additional element, which is that some systems have an additional crew capacity/rating stat, which on some systems is as high as 2, on others as low as a quarter, and completely absent on many others. It's not super clear whether higher numbers are better because you can have more crew benefiting a system, or lower because a crew member could run multiple systems at once, or whether the ideal is 1.25 because you can have 2 crew members but one can multitask. It also doesn't seem to be linked directly to companion skills, as there are systems with crew capacities that don't have corresponding skills, and systems without crew capacities that do. We also have some evidence of automation, as one of the 2x1 habitat sections is a computer core that doesn't list a specific function in the shipbuilder, but could let you set up a crew replacing mainframe in an interior customization menu. Todd Howard did say that you could sort of have a ship crewed by robots, and while my initial thought was that that meant you could have robot crew members but they'd lack tech skills and thus be worse than a normal human crew, he could also have meant that an AI could run your ship's functions. Next up is the boosting your velocity category, with 2 boost back skills. I'm guessing the basic is just speed or fuel consumption, with the more advanced one allowing for either combat bonuses like slowing time when aiming, or for fancier aerial maneuvers like these little dodges. Finally comes the bypassing security category, which covers lockpicking for standard security systems and robotics for more lethal ones. Robotics has already been confirmed to grant bonus damage to robots and presumably turrets, but I think it's also very likely that it will be involved in this game's version of the automaton system, as we've seen both concept art of different Vasco customizations and at least 5 different robot designs all using the highly customizable Lunar Robotics Type A chassis. 6 if you count the mechs, which seem to be a bit short on limbs in most shots and a bit stylized in the animated trailer, but still clearly have the same body type as Vasco, if a bit bulkier in the limbs. I'd say that points to them being in-game, since it would make animating them a lot easier, but the QA that just came out said that mechs have been banned since the Colony War ended and are too ruined to be usable, so unless any of the factions you encounter are willing to break the law, you won't have to deal with any. My assessment of the tech skill tree is that it's pretty good, with the ship customization and piloting both looking like a lot of fun, though it is a little more heavily geared towards just running all of the many ship weapons and systems than I'd like. I'm also somewhat annoyed or disappointed that the ship weapon skills are all repeats of ground weapon skills, not because I think there shouldn't be ship weapon skills, but because I'd prefer the synergy of having combat cover the handheld weapon types and then having tech give bonuses to the projectile types of both ground and ship weapons, which would free up a massive chunk of the combat tree for more real perks and more melee weapon skills. Obviously, the notable absence is anything related to ground vehicles. I'm quite okay with rovers not being in the game, since if you just scanned a planet, landed at one point of interest, and then drove to any nearby ones, you wouldn't really have time to stop and scan the roses. Mechs I'm still holding out for in a DLC or at least a set piece. Allow me my denial. I worked so hard on this. And I guess that brings us to the end of the series. I feel like I should end this by rating the entire Toddam skill system, but I can't do so fairly without having played the game, so you'll have to settle for some broad observations. First, while I previously wasn't sure they should have removed attributes, I now think that's a good choice, since given this game's emphasis on technology and research, you'd end up with 6 strength skills and 23 intelligence skills. Though, having some total physical or tech score you could draw upon to roleplay or solve problems sometimes could be workable. Second, it's spread a little thin dealing with so many different gameplay styles and mechanics. While there are a lot of skills, 83 in total, about a third of those are just covering basic skill functions like weapon damage and gear upgrades, and that goes up to at least half if you throw in simple stat buffs like wellness and weightlifting. While the skill tree is full of skills is not exactly a shocking statement, the skills in this game are also its perks, and having so much basic stuff like flat weapon damage heavily limits the amount of cool stuff like adrenaline rush or nerd rage you can have. However, the skill system does include some room to grow in the DLC, with each tree having room for 3 or 4 more perks and the potential for added skill tiers or just wider trees to fit in whatever new ideas the devs think of. So yeah, that's what I'm comfortable saying at this juncture, and for anyone who watched the whole series, I have just one non-monetary favor to ask. If there's anything in these videos that was actually new information, could you just put it in the comments so I could maybe make a couple more shorts and get the word out on some of them? I'm also probably going to make a compilation video of all of these that includes the Q&A info. And remember, for more exciting Starfield information, wait 2 weeks and play the game. Peace out.